There's a transformative part of putting on a mask, and when I do my mustache, I become a different person in a way. When you put on a mask, you become someone else. When you're on the stage, when you're performing, you become someone else. And I sort of become a different type of person. I become more of a personification of the folk dance, sort of stereotypical thing in Hungarian culture. You can make it curl, but this has been my go-to for a while because some of the outlaws from the 19th century had this style of mustache, and I kind of like that, and I kind of like that look. Kind of makes me a different person right now, a little bit more confident. Húz, megfordul, kezd, titita, és jó, 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 tökéletes. My name is Gabor, or at least that's how my English friends know me, or my Canadian friends know me. My name is actually pronounced Gábor, and my last name is Dobi. So Gábor Dobi, or in Hungarian, the surname is first, so it's Dobi Gábor. And if you know me a little bit more intimately, then people usually call me Dobi Gábor, and it kind of rhymes a little bit. I was born in Toronto. I've lived in Budapest for about 10 years. I went to school in Pittsburgh, where I was part of a dance group. And of course, I was part of the dance group here in Toronto, part of the Kodály ensemble, which I also led in the 90s. So I'm kind of oldish, but I guess that's okay.
Hát én 83-ban kezdtem el táncolni a Kodály együttesbe, de azelőtt pedig az Arany János iskolában is táncoltam 80 óta.
When I was younger, everybody wanted to dance because the Kodály ensemble was such a magnetic group. It was young, it was just full of energy. They performed. When you hear the applause, you're sort of mesmerized by that and you want to be a part of that. And I know that not everybody is drawn to that, and you have to have a certain type of personality to be able to go on the stage and to absorb all of that. There's a bit of an ego there that sort of drives you. And I'm, I guess, that person, although I do have an introverted aspect to myself as well. And I always danced when I was a kid. I would just move around and whatever. And this was definitely something that I wanted to do. It was not church, it wasn't Hungarian school. It was something that I asked my parents to take me to. There was nothing that was going to keep me from not being in the dance group. It was a way to intermingle with the opposite sex. But back then, it was an important thing. Like it provided a way for people to legitimately, physically get to know each other. It's actually a good way to expose young people, like to help them etiquette-wise. And I'm sure if you ask any guy from that generation, from the 80s, that was the one thing that motivated them to go to folk dancing. But then when they got there, they realized that the dancing was so incredibly amazing, and it kept them there, right? So you have a bunch of teenagers who have this suppressed like energy waiting to be expressed, and road trips, and you were able to do bad things with your friends that your parents weren't, privy to, and it was kind of like, okay, well, of course we didn't have phones back then, so it was a different world.
I also bought a late idea, but we got what I'm going to do is we'll just sign this charcuterie board on the rounded edges, and then what I'll do is I'll put a picture of us once we get it done in the middle. And then I'll just laminate it and we'll pass it over to him afterwards. Best thing to do for now.
Sometimes my mind clicks and I have to do a performance, and then I call everybody up and they go, yeah, let's do it. And then I go, why did I call everybody up? And now I have to do the performance, which was the case this time, but we succeeded.
Once you stop, what if you guys move back here? stop here and you look at the video.
I've always been interested in mythology. I'm not a very religious person. I'm not even sure if I believe in God. However, I think there's a story to be told about mythology, a story to be told about God that sort of connects us to our past. And once we understand and realize what those things mean, we kind of begin to understand what our humanity means, what our civilization means in a way. I've always been a little bit of a fan of Joseph Campbell and the way he defines what mythology is and the hero's journey. It doesn't have to be necessarily someone who is at the pinnacle of the civilization. It could just be any sort of ordinary person who goes on a heroic jaunt. In a way, I identified myself as that person, and it could really just be anyone within our community. And I kind of understood that me as a Canadian Hungarian, I mean, we don't have to come to terms with our identity within this sort of community, but there comes a time when you kind of realize that maybe you do have to go through that whole search for who you are and how you belong and where you belong in this society. And I thought a way to come to terms with that would be to express it through a performance. But because I also included the whole idea of the 1956 revolution, it provided a story. It provided a way for me to express that story. And the dance provided the framework in which I was able to express it on the stage. I think we all sort of encompass that idea of the hero. We just have to come to that realization. I'm just the hero in this sense because I've come to that realization. I've become cognizant of the fact that the hero or this heroic journey exists within my existence. "1956 will definitely mean completely different things to different generations, and obviously 20 years from now or 30 years from now, it may not even register on the radar anymore. And maybe that's not so much the point. The point is that it happened, and it's a historical thing, and it sort of shaped the community when it happened, when the community came to Canada. My parents were of that generation. My parents escaped Hungary in 1956. So for me, the stories, the things that people were saying, the things that were happening in the community at the time, in the 1980s, for instance, were very much tied to 1956, because obviously in the 80s, Hungary was still a communist country, or more precisely an authoritarian country, and it seemed as though the people in the émigré in Canada, in the United States, and Australia, those Hungarians were the ones that were keeping the Hungarian culture alive whatever that means. And what I experienced in the 80s was a very communal sort of idea of Hungarian identity, which was taught to us at Hungarian school, at church, at community events. And it kind of was ingrained in our sort of senses. We didn't have an individualistic idea of or interpretation of what it is to be Hungarian, because it was kind of given to us. And we didn't really have to think about it too much. Now, obviously, we did. When we were alone, we thought about it, of course. But it was very present. It was omnipresent. It wasn't even something that needed to be preserved on our part, because it was there. It was always accessible. It was always in contrast to what was happening in Hungary, because the people who were here felt that they needed to sustain and upkeep the Hungarian culture, whatever they thought that meant. As far as what that means to me in the context of identity, I think I've always been a little bit cognizant of who I am within this community. Being so involved makes me at least wonder about how I belong in one part of the community and how I belong in another part of the community, because I accept the fact that I'm both Hungarian and Canadian, and I try to nurture both aspects. I'm not Hungarian in the sense of coming from Hungary. I don't identify with those Hungarians. I identify with the 1956 Hungarians. That's my identity. That's my Hungarian identity. That will end at some point. When our generation sort of dies, that idea of that type of identity will die with that. Unless we keep up the communal stories, we keep up the history, we sort of pass down the history, we pass down the oral traditions of these stories to the next generation, it will essentially die. It will only be in history books, and that identity, my identity as a Hungarian, because it's so intimately tied to 1956, will cease to exist. Nowadays, people have less of a sense of what it is to be Hungarian. They're kind of left to their own devices in trying to make heads or tails of it, trying to interpret it for themselves, which is kind of interesting, which is kind of cool. I'm a completely individualistic type of person in a way, but I feel like something's been lost because we've lost that whole community aspect to who we are and what we are as an identity. You know, the funny thing is that when you're in this communal sort of setting and you have to go to the event, or you have to go to church, or you have to believe in God, or you have to believe in this aspect of Hungarian culture, it gives you an outlet to have a contrasting opinion and to then develop your own ideas of what it is to be Hungarian. When you're left to your own devices, you don't have that initial sort of idea of what the tribe feels about it, and you don't have that sense of belonging anymore as you did before. And before, being part of that tribe, like forcefully, like really forcefully being part of that tribe, gave you a way to then kind of understand how you want to perceive it and how you want to express what that identity is. I feel like if you don't get that sort of initiation into the tribe, you know, the scarring, Joseph Campbell talks about this in Australian culture, where the tribes scarify you because then it shows you that you're part of the tribe. Well, that scarification happened in the Hungarian community in the 80s and the 70s. It completely happened, and I was Hungarian. Everybody knew I was Hungarian, and there were people in the Hungarian community who were born in Canada and Toronto who had Hungarian accents when they spoke English. And it provided me, at least, with this sense of, okay, I've been forced to be Hungarian, I've been forced to be a certain type of person, and now it's my turn to figure that out and to then really understand what it actually means for me. I think what the dance group, and not necessarily just me as an individual, but the dance group itself gives the community a way to express itself visually. Like, dancing is just such a profound and lyrical way to represent an ethnicity, an identity within this whole sort of Canadian mosaic. And what the community offers to us as dancers is a way for us to get in touch with the language, a way for us to get in touch with, maybe if you're interested in the religion. It's symbiotic because we can only exist if there's a Hungarian community, and the Hungarian community needs us. A lot of what happens within the community is insular, but I feel dancing is kind of a bridge that provides a way to connect with the rest of Canada, with the rest of Canadian culture, with the rest of society that we live in. And it doesn't insulate, it projects, and it offers a way to bring these people to come closer to us.
So this came together in one day. In one day, basically. We put everything on the internet, and I told these guys to learn it, and they did. This was a journey, like Joseph Campbell's heroic journey, and I'm glad you all came and experienced this with us. And I hope you let everybody in the community know, not just to support this, but to support like the Kitchener group, the Hamilton group, the Montreal group, the Ottawa group, and of course, our wonderful group here in Toronto, the Kodály Ensemble. So support the culture that's here as well, not just the culture that comes from Hungary, because it's quality here as well. Thank you very much.